Welcome to Making the Cut podcast with Chris Hill and Sean Winter, where we help you succeed in life and business by sharing principles and strategies that guide some of the most successful people in the world.
Welcome to Making the Cut podcast, episode 2. I'm Chris Hill.
I'm Sean Winter, and today we have an incredible guest. Chris, you got to interview Seth Godin. Oh my goodness. How was that?
Right out of the gates, huh? Man, it was fantastic. He's been a real mentor for me from afar, from really some of the earlier days when I started out in business, and he's impacted lives all over the world. So it was really neat to sit down and chat with him about business and life and how he's really impacted me in just a variety of ways.
Yeah, and somebody who's an author, an entrepreneur, a marketer, a public speaker, a thought leader. I mean, the guy has done so much, and especially in the world for marketing. For me, he's impacted me in that area heavily. But he's done so much. But when you met with him, he was just a normal guy, right? I mean, he was very hospitable. I think you had said, just a very, very good guy at the same time. So what was that like, being able to meet him for the first time and sit down with him?
Yeah, Sean, sometimes you meet somebody in person that you really admire for whatever reason, and you're kind of let down or disappointed. And this was almost the opposite. Somebody like that could easily have a bit of an ego or be kind of quick with his time and not really contribute as much as you would hope. But he was very present, very thoughtful. His wife owns a couple bakeries there in town, and he brought us some muffins to try and was curious to see what our thoughts were. So, yeah, I mean, just across the board. And I can't say enough nice things about really him and just the presence he has. If there's one thing that I wish I had that he does, it's the way he can articulate his thoughts. And you can tell that he just spends a lot of time with his own thoughts. And he's been doing the blog for a couple thousand blog posts without missing a day. I think it's 15 or 20 years now.
Yeah, that, and I think 17 or 18 books at this point. I want to say 18. And I think The Purple Cow, which was one of my absolute favorites, sold somewhere around 150,000 copies and has been had about 23 print runs in the first 2 years. And then even The Dip. I mean, The Dip was a huge one as well. And speaking of that, I think that was one of the ones that really impacted you. Take us through that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we talk about it in the interview, but we don't actually really get into my story too much. But yeah, for anyone that knows my story or doesn't, I've had some challenges in my entrepreneurial journey. I, went to grad school, then jumped into marketing, realized how much I hated my job, opened up the restaurant. For the first 3 years, didn't make a dime. At the same time, I'm building my personal brand, just trying to kind of make things work. And along the way, I knew things were working, but it definitely wasn't very fast. It definitely didn't feel like it was moving very fast to the people around me. So I didn't have the encouragement that I felt like I needed at the time. You kind of backed against the wall in a corner at times, and you're not really sure how to get out. And the only way I was really able to persevere and keep going through was to read this book that Seth Godin wrote called The Dip. And if you haven't read it, it's about 70, 80, maybe 90 pages. It's an afternoon read, but it really talks about when to quit, when to keep going. And the whole premise is, if somebody's done this before, then you can do it too. So getting into it smartly and knowing that part of what makes it meaningful to accomplish something is to keep fighting through the dip, which is when most people quit because it's hard and scary and challenging. But anything worthwhile, anything meaningful that we do in our lives is going to have a dip, whether it's a business, passing a class, a relationship, and the list goes on. So for me to read that book, it was so timely. It was a point where I really kind of felt like giving up. But I knew reading that book that, dude, you can keep going. If you do, there's some incredible rewards on the other side. I think you said you've read it before too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to zero in on what you said in terms of, if somebody has done something before, then you can do it too. And that is all about having the right belief system in place. And belief is so powerful. You might have heard this before, but the whole story of Roger Bannister, a lot of motivational speakers will talk about this. Yeah. So he was the first one that ran the mile under 4 minutes. He did so after many, many years of people trying to run faster and all these different things. But even at that time, it was science that even proved, quote, air quotes, proved to people that the body couldn't sustain being able to run that fast. And yet he was able to do it. And the astonishing part, and this is where belief comes into play, it only took 46 days after he broke the record for someone to break his. Think about that for a minute. It took him breaking that record when it hadn't been done before. And I mean, we've been running for years and years and years. I mean, hundreds, thousands of years. And yet 46 days. And that's because the next person that broke it saw that he could do it. So they believed in themselves and they pushed themselves further. And that is everything as it relates to succeeding in life or business, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's in a career and you're trying to move up. If you just have that strong belief, then you can make it.
Absolutely. And he always says you can be the person that goes out and does something that's never been done before, but you don't have to be. You can do something that's been done in a very similar way, but perhaps in your own way, which kind of also leads into another great book of his, Purple Cow, which I know you've loved and has probably helped you a lot in the marketing world as well.
Absolutely. With Purple Cow, it's all about being remarkable. It's all about standing out. It's all about being valuable. And to backtrack for a moment, for the dip for me, I knew when I was launching Entrepreneurial Chef at the beginning of this year that there was going to be a dip, right? The initial excitement will fade and there's going to be rejections. There's going to be times where it does not seem like it is going to work just in that moment, or it doesn't seem like it's working in that moment, but I never lost sight of the fact that I believed that it was going to work long term. And that was a big differentiating factor. And that's also very big in the dip as well. It's the difference between it's not working now or it's not working ever. And I think for a lot of people who are listening to this, you've got to really analyze. If you're going through a tough spot, you've got to really analyze, look in and just ask yourself, is it not working now or is it not ever going to work? And if it's just not working now, but you believe that at some point it will work, or if someone else has been able to do it, what you're trying to do, and they've been able to make it work, then guess what? It can work for you. It's just going to take a little time. And really, that book set me up for the right frame of mind as I was getting rejected by people, as it wasn't picking up as fast as I wanted it to pick up, and just going through those waves that entrepreneurs face, and you know it very well. So that's number one. Number two, yes, the book Purple Cow. It's so important that whatever you're doing, whatever it's going to be in life and business or whatever, that you are providing value. And if right now if you just started a business, you have a business, and let's just say that the customers are not rolling in like you wanted them to, usually it's because you've got a value proposition problem. You either are not providing enough value or you're not communicating your value correctly. And that's where the Purple Cow comes into play. For me, at least, it was really understanding the concept of providing value and being remarkable so that individuals are going to make remarks about you, right?
Exactly. It's funny when he tells the story about the Purple Cow, he makes the analogy that, he's driving down the highway with his kids in the back car, and you're in rural America somewhere, and you see a cow in the pasture, out in the distance somewhere. Who's going to remark? Nobody. Who cares? It's a cow. You've seen a million cows in your life before. But if the cow was purple, you'd be like, holy crap, that's a purple cow. But if they're all purple, then you wouldn't care either. So it's figuring out a way to differentiate yourself. What can I bring to the marketplace that's different than anyone else? And it doesn't mean that you have to be entirely different. What has been done before, but you can put your own spin on it, right? Yeah,
and remix something together. It's a lot of the innovative ideas that come to us. It's not a very large deviation to what has been done before, right? So sometimes it's just a small deviation, or it's a combination of two things just remixed in a different way, and all of a sudden you've got this new innovative product or idea or concept or something. So sometimes it's just a minor shift. I mean, you can look at even the smartphone, for instance. We had a phone before, right? We had rotary phones, and now comes along a smartphone. Now someone might debate and say, well, that's a huge evolution and that's a major leap in technology. Yeah, I agree. But at the end of the day, look at it from a 30,000 foot viewpoint. They're phones, right? One just happens to act a little bit differently than the other one. And again, someone can debate with me and say, oh no, it's major evolution of that. No, it's not. It's a deviation to what was already there, right? Just a small shift.
Or if you even want to play that card, I remember growing up when I was, 5, 8, 10 years old, my mom driving us around the station wagon. We had one of those where you drill it into the floor of the car phones.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay, so there's part of the evolution, and it keeps going, and now it's more like a computer, but it works like a phone, just like your rotary phone does.
Mm-hmm. And so the key is how do you find a way to take what maybe has already been done before and turn it, remix it, do something, whatever it's going to be, and then become that purple cow, if you will. So
exactly. Well, like one of my favorite blog posts that Seth has written, it was probably about a month ago. Maybe we can link it up in the show notes. But it was that we're in the age of unlimited bowling, meaning that if you and I go bowling and we pay for 2 games, it's $10 with our shoes, right? And we only get a certain number of bowls, and then we're done. But if we have unlimited bowling, then we can try different shots. We can try and put some spin on it, which I'm a horrible bowler, by the way. But we can try different things to try and get better, and it's not going to really hurt our score. The game's not going to ever be over. We're at the point where we can try new things. We can try to experiment and play around with things in a way that allows us to figure out the best way to move forward. Versus before, you didn't really have the opportunities that we do now. So. We talk about that a little bit, and he's awesome. We had an awesome interview. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. We want to welcome Seth Godin.
Well, Seth, thank you for joining me and having me here.
Pleasure.
You've been a big inspiration for me, and I know a lot of people in my life and just people I talk to on a daily basis. So thank you for your work. What, for you, does it mean to make a ruckus?
I think that what we do with the status quo is an interesting choice. The status quo is present everywhere, and we can either accept it or we can ignore it, but ignoring it's sort of dangerous. I think it makes more sense to know what it is and then challenge the parts that need to be challenged. So I guess for today, that's my definition of making a ruckus.
Okay. And I feel like a lot of your ideas kind of work off of each other a little bit.
I hope so.
The idea of making a ruckus, but also, I'm making a ruckus, or I'm going to try at least, but that might not work. And along the way, there'll be a few dips here and there.
Yeah.
And the dip literally saved me. I mean, I've told you before, we were talking before with the restaurant. Like the first 3 years I was there, I didn't make any money, and I kind of went down this path. And for a lot of people that looked at me and said, "Well, you're it's not working, and it's not going to work." I knew it was. Maybe kind of like you with your 800 rejection letters in a row. Is it the progress that helps you know that you're in the dip, or is it that?
Well, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking it's not working. It's the same thing as it's not going to work.
Right.
They're two unrelated things,
mm-hmm.
right? Lots of things that are working today aren't going to work in the long run, but we don't equate those two things. But most things that work in the long run have moments where they're not working today.
Right.
And the purpose of the book was to help pry those two things apart.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are doing something that is not working, it doesn't make any sense to quit unless you have insight about what's on the other side of the dip, what's on the other side of that hassle. So if you're in organic chemistry and you're getting C's, you could say to yourself, I'm never going to be a doctor, and stop. Or you can understand that once you get through organic chemistry, a whole bunch of other things get easier. And lots of people become doctors every day. So we know it's possible to become a doctor. We know it's possible to have a restaurant succeed. There is a path. You're just in the hard part at the beginning, because lots of people like starting restaurants. It's just very few people have the fortitude and the skill to actually run one in the long haul. So the hard part in the restaurant business is getting through the part at the beginning that seems fun, right?
Right.
But understand that there's really tough times about to happen, because if there weren't, then everyone would own a restaurant.
Right.
And everyone doesn't.
And that's what was kind of going to be my next question, I think, is have you ever done any work that's been meaningful for you that hasn't entailed work?
That hasn't entailed
work or like a considerable effort?
Most of the projects I work on fail, and I'm really proud of that. The projects that have succeeded, every once in a while something just succeeds.
Right.
You put some work into it, but it's fun work, and then the world gets the joke. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But when you connect the dots, that rarely leads to a career. Right? So sometimes I'll go and I'll give a speech, and the audience will be ready for me, and the room will be ready for me, and the setting will work. And like from the first slide, I'm in. And if that's all there was to giving speeches, nothing would ever go wrong.
Right.
But most of the time you show up, you have to win them over. Most of the time you show up and there's obstacles that you have to get through because people have their armor on. So I guess what I'm saying is there are very few careers that work from the beginning to the end. There's lots of steps along the way where it's just sunshine. I'm glad. But show me a career where it works from the beginning and the end. I'll show you something very rare.
And also maybe something that isn't necessarily valuable. I'm not sure. Maybe not. But I think also, and when you have these dips, they can obviously they can change and morph in different ways and shapes, so that my dip now might be a little bit different than the one I had 35 years ago. And knowing I've gotten through some before helped me to realize that, okay, I've been here before, I can keep grinding.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important for me to be clear about this. Reassurance is futile. That if you're looking to me or to anyone in the outside world to tell you everything's going to be okay, you're wasting your time. Because first of all, no one knows. Secondly, everything is not going to be okay. You're going to get rejected. You're going to get busted. You're going to get kicked out. That's just going to happen. So if you're not prepared for that, go get a job.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you, I always knew for myself that it would work, but there was times when it was very hard and dark and backed into a corner, and is this going to work or not? And I've heard your stories, and a lot of it's been very helpful for me. And I can tell you also, I feel like there's a lot of people in the culinary industry and restaurants that are cooks or want to become chefs. And I think a lot of what you talk about really resonates with at least the idea of what they need to be doing in terms of this might not work. Okay, I'm grilling these vegetables. How do I grill them perfectly? Underseason them, overseason them, and then after 10 different times, now I know how to season it properly.
Yeah. So a couple things. This book here, the original title was
Great book, yeah.
The Chef, the Cook, and the Bottle Washer.
I think I remember hearing that somewhere,
Yeah, and the idea is that a bottle washer has a really nasty job and does exactly what he's told all day long. A cook has a slightly less nasty job and is told what to do all day long. The chef figures out what to do tomorrow. That's her job. Being a chef is fundamentally different than being a cook. That's the distinction. Do we need cooks? We do. Does that mean you have to be a cook? No, someone else can be a cook. You can be a chef. And what it means to be a chef is your job is to decide what to do next. So here's an interesting thing that you see in New York restaurants all the time. They use too much oil and they use too much salt because that's cheating.
Yeah.
And so it's a shortcut. You'll get 5 minutes of pleasure on the plate if you just dump some butter on there and a half a shaker of salt. The thing is, real chefs don't need to do that. Because real chefs understand that the tension between I have an idea and the diner is happy, that tension is the point. You're not trying to run an efficient factory. You're trying to open the doors of experience for people. You can do that without a recipe book, cookbook, or stupid shortcuts.
Right.
You can do it by being present and doing something where you and you alone are contributing value. That doesn't work at scale. I get that.
Yeah.
But then we look at someone like Danny Meyer from Union Square, and Shake
Let's
Shack.
talk about him on the way over here, actually.
And so Shake Shack's doing great, right? Every time you go to a Shake Shack, you can get the same item. So there's a lot of bottle washers. There's a lot of chefs at Shake Shack. But what Danny has done that's transformative is he has insisted that everyone act like a human being. So he doesn't really sell hamburgers. He sells smiles, and you get the hamburger for free.
Right. And he started that 30-something years ago, whenever it was, with Union Square Cafe.
Exactly.
I don't know if you read Setting the Table, but it's a great book.
I actually have. I think I'm mentioned in it. And
very cool.
I've known Danny for a long time.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I got to interview one of his partners, Richard Crane, for the first book that I wrote. And they do a great job. So also I think it's people getting frustrated when things aren't working, as in like the moment, like I tried a dish, it's not working. And a lot of times people feel like they're not moving far enough along. And I guess that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, but at the same time, if something we know is going to work, then what's the point of doing it?
Right. But also I want to broaden the conversation just a little bit here, because in my understanding of people who go to restaurants, 98% of them are not going because this dish is better than that dish. That is not what restaurants are about. That might be what buying frozen pizza is about. Mm-hmm. But in a double-blind study, restaurant food tastes like restaurant food.
Experience.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, no one's double-blind. Mm-hmm. So you have this other opportunity, which is, we can create an experience.
Right.
So in Las Vegas, where I was a couple nights ago, there's a little strip mall with 3 different Thai restaurants in it. And we ate at one of them, and Gail, whose mother's in the kitchen and who's the pastry chef and who's waiting tables, Gail understands how to create an experience for people who have a choice, because there's another restaurant right next door.
Right.
And it's not because her non-prick tastes different than theirs.
Or cheaper, or...
Exactly. It's because something happened in that moment with those people that was human. And Gail was the person who was able to deliver that. That's our opportunity.
How do you... I feel like there's a certain part of me and certain people, Danny Meyer, yourself, that understand this on a very kind of fundamental level, but how do you get people to start noticing those things? Is it by starting a blog and things like that help you to just notice more of what's going on around you in the world?
So changing people is what we all do for a living. You're trying to change someone from an unexcited diner to an excited diner, from a non-loyal customer to a loyal customer. Change is what we do. So changing ourselves is where it has to start. Mm-hmm. Then it turns out your banker and your in-laws and the teachers you had are all pushing you to fit in. That this is the giant lie of most culinary schools, is culinary schools do not train chefs. They train cooks. Mm-hmm. And, yes, you need to understand knife work, but you don't need to understand all the stuff that you have to grind your way through, because that's what cooks do. They're trained to be a chef. Mm-hmm. And so the way you practice to be a chef is by being a chef in all things. You figure out, how can I do something tomorrow that might not work? That in between gigs, how do I, set up go to a homeless camp and figure out how to create an environment, invest $20 so that those people who haven't had the privilege of eating the kind of food you hope to make can feel something in this moment. Mm-hmm. That we get so many chances, whether it's writing a blog or talking to people on an airplane or just being in the world, to act like a chef, to be the person who is the impresario, who creates the moment. Learn how to do that, because you already know how to dice carrots. We don't have a shortage of carrot dicers.
Well, that's a lot of what my writing and what I talk about is, I don't need to go in and make a YouTube video on how to make Brussels sprouts or a muffin. What people do need, I think, is to understand that they have an opportunity every day to connect with the work, to connect with the people around them, and to make changes in whatever way they can in whatever capacity. So,
right.
I have a question from my buddy Sean.
Okay. Hey, Sean.
Content marketing has obviously been around, and it's not going to go anywhere. It's gotten a lot more crowded, I think, especially with a lot bigger brands getting in the mix.
Industrialized pallid, fake content marketing.
Okay. Gotcha. Does it get to a certain place or point where content marketing becomes less valuable, and especially for
So let me try to explain. Do you remember there used to be a brand called As Seen on TV?
Mm-hmm.
That there would be ads on packages. You should buy this because it was on TV. That is the opposite of content marketing. That's saying advertising is a sufficient reason to buy something. Mm-hmm. Right? That these are all the same, but this one was on TV.
So you should buy it.
Content marketing says there's something about my experience that's worth talking about. Okay? So the Monkees were on TV. Bob Dylan has content. Mm-hmm. That distinction is the key. So when Hershey's comes up with 30 bloggers who are busy writing stupid stuff about Hershey's Kisses, follow us on Twitter. That's stupid. That's the wrong kind of content marketing, because who's actually going to follow that? Why would you do that? Whereas when we bring something to the table that is worth talking about, that's content marketing, real content marketing.
Gotcha.
I don't think that's going to go away because I don't know what's going to take its place.
I guess that makes sense, because I look at my buddy was concerned or curious because a lot of people now see content marketing, and then there's more and more, so they think that maybe they can get more and more things for free, download free music. But at the same time, things like the Alt MBA that you have, people are signing up and applying and spending money on things like that. So if the value is still there and people can connect with it, then maybe the opportunity is there.
Yeah, here's what I've discovered. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe you know someone. I don't know anybody who is trusted by a lot of people who doesn't have... I don't know anybody who's trusted by a lot of people who can't make a good living. So if you're trusted by enough people, you're fine. Mm-hmm. And the question might be how trusted and how many people. But that's up for debate. But the more you share your idea, the more your idea is worth. Mm-hmm. And we haven't run out of ways to turn ideas into souvenirs. So my work is free online. I've written 7,000 blog posts. But the new edition of my giant book, which comes out in a couple of weeks, costs $200.
Right.
And people all over the world in 49 countries have bought it, right? What are they buying? Right? Because the words are free on the internet. So what are they buying? They're buying an experience. They're buying a souvenir. They're buying a connection. They're buying patronage. All those things. Mm-hmm. So we can keep doing this. We just can't do it the way we used to do it. The old model was, we have a factory no one else does. If you want something that we make, you have to buy it. And there's enough money for anyone to get a job here who's willing to follow instructions. So it's cooks that are ultimately going to be in trouble. Chefs, if they are really actually good at being chefs, mm-hmm. shouldn't end up in any trouble at all.
And that's also kind of part of being generous and artistic, right?
That's right. So, art and generosity are why people want to connect.
Right.
And it was really, if I can talk about David Chang for a minute, we used to go, my family, to Momofuku mm-hmm. when it was first opened. And I'm a vegetarian, and they would happily make me the Brussels sprouts without the bacon. Mm-hmm. And we'd sit at the counter, and there'd be an interaction. We all know what happened. It got so crowded, no one went there anymore. That it becomes popular. People go because it's popular now.
Right.
And like all businesses, popular could lead to more popular, or it could lead to the fade. Mm-hmm. But the opportunity and the challenge is to keep figuring out how to get beyond it's famous because it's famous and get back to it's famous because it's real. Because mm-hmm. that's why David got into the restaurant business in the first place.
Right.
So all the corporate pressure is to build a giant home delivery business and make everything a cookie cutter. And in the short run, that's a fine way to make $1 million. But in the long run, what we see is it's connection and connection and connection that drives our economy.
Yeah, and I appreciate him too, because he knew that the fine dining traditional way wasn't going to work for him. So mm-hmm. how can I do it in the way that makes sense for me? And I think now he's they got the food lab, and they're finding new ways to bring art to the table to hopefully delight and make people happy.
Yeah.
Seth, thank you for your time.
Oh,
I really appreciate it.
Keep making a ruckus.
You as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
So that was our interview with Seth Godin. And, Sean, as I was driving home from the interview, I was thinking to myself, what really resonated with me was the fact that, a lot of his work, and I even mentioned it in the conversation, it all kind of works off of each other. And for me, that really kind of looks like, how do you create a successful career for yourself in a world that's unpredictable? When things not only go wrong, but you also have an economy that's insane out there. You have technology that's always changing, and you never are really guaranteed that anything's going to work for sure. So for me, that's really just talking with him, kind of working through some of those ideas has been really helpful and impactful. And I'd be curious to see kind of and hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, when you guys were talking toward the end about an opportunity and a challenge and the whole, is it famous because it's famous? And then is it something that will work in the short run and you'll make $1 million, or in the long run, it's all about connection, all of those different things right there. It's the opportunity and challenge is what we've got to frame things in a way that all of these unpredictable factors are opportunities and challenges. That's what I'm trying to say essentially. So as things are unpredictable, as you get knocked off course, if you look at it as though that's your opportunity, or that's just a challenge, or just maybe a temporary something, it's going to allow you to continue to persevere and continue on showing up every single day and trying new things and not getting beat down. I think that was very impactful for me. Another piece was about looking for reassurance is futile. And that hit home because a lot of people are looking for that reassurance. And sometimes you just have to look from within and find it within yourself and continue on and keep pushing and not spend an hour to 5 hours trying to search for answers online, or talking to a lot of people or asking them, are you doing the right thing? And yeah, sure, there's going to be times where you want some feedback, but I believe feedback is going to be different from reassurance, right? So feedback is more data points that can allow you to make good decisions, versus reassurance to me is more of a pat on the back, right? And so I think that was a very interesting concept, and especially when he said there are few careers that work. And by work, I took that as him saying work very easily or can instantly work out of the gates. But there are few careers that can work from beginning to end that he knows of. And if you pinpoint one, then we're about to see something that's going to be very rare. And I believe that too.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And what I kind of started to mention in the talk was that if you do find something that is very safe from beginning to end, how meaningful is it? Are you doing work that's important or interesting? I see that as being a toll booth collector, on the side of the interstate. And so maybe to circle back around to talk about reassurance, getting reassurance for anything, all that does is eliminates risk. If you are sure that that it's going to work for you, then you have no risk, and then anyone would do it. And since you can't get reassurance and you can't ever know for sure that it's going to work or not, 95% of the people listening to this podcast or reading his books or whatever are not going to contribute the way that they could because of that fear, because of the risk, which is why the people that actually do that 5% or 10%, whatever it is, that's why they are able to create things that haven't existed before. That's why they're able to be entrepreneurs and authors and chefs and incredibly talented business people.
Yeah, and do so by providing a lot of value, and I think that's another piece that when anybody is trying to do something meaningful, it's about providing value. And if right now you're not moving up in the way that you want to move up, if it's been 2, 5, 7, 9, whatever years since you've been able to really climb the ladder more, or in your business right now, if you don't have customers in the way that you thought they were going to roll in, it's about value. And I know that we talked about this before, but here's my analogy. Chris, if I told you you had no car, you had no just a transportation, nothing. Transportation was out. You had no money at all. So no transportation, you had no money. And I told you right now that if in 3 weeks you could travel from Atlanta to Seattle, I would be in Seattle and I would give you a briefcase of $1 million cash. Do you think you would find a way?
Well, I'd probably start trekking down the interstate, and then along the way, I would have my thumb up, and I would offer some people some money along the way, and I would find a way. I'd probably be there in about 2 weeks, just to make sure.
Absolutely, you would. And most people would too. They would find a way. They wouldn't throw their hands up in the air and say, I don't have a car. I don't have money.
I'll take an Uber for $10,000. I don't care.
Yeah. And I mean, you would negotiate your way. You'd say, listen, I will pay you as soon as I get there, right? So, or whatever it's going to be, you would find a way. And so that's my analogy for value. If you're not moving up, if you don't have customers, you've got to look at the value they're providing. Are you communicating, number one, in a way that says, I've got this $1 million lottery ticket for you? Or are you acting in that way that you are just so valuable, whatever, to your customers or to the marketplace that's going to attract people? And that in return will essentially make you a purple cow. Because when you look around, some people are just doing either the status quo and they're not a cut above the rest. And the ones that are a cut above the rest are the ones that are providing the most value to people. And people will connect with that. And that's why Seth said in the long run that I believe that you will sustain long term in a company or career when you have that connection piece. And I believe that connection piece comes with providing a lot of value too.
And that was reassuring to hear too, because he said he didn't know anyone who is trusted by a lot of people that isn't able to make an income.
And especially what I see with now entrepreneurial chefs, I've got a lot of people that complete a survey. So I've got an automatic survey that goes out to everybody, and I'm just very curious as to what they're going through, and I do so that I can create content or interview individuals or talk about things in a way that's going to help them and provide enough value to them specifically. What I find is a lot of people are looking for funds to launch their businesses. So they have an idea. Some of them may have a plan, but they don't have money to be able to launch. And that's consistent with a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs. And I say to that, if you become a person that is trustworthy, and if you have a strong reputation, which, by the way, those two things take time. They take a lot of time. But if you have those two things in place, chances are you're not going to have a money issue. Chances are you're going to be able to leverage that trust, leverage that reputation in a way that you will essentially be able to print money, right?
You're speaking my language. Whenever anyone asks me, Chris, how do I raise money for a restaurant or a food truck or a catering company I want to start? I say, well, first of all, what kind of restaurant do you want to start? Let's say it's a seafood place. Okay, well, 2 years ago, you should have started coming up with all these recipes you're going to have maybe in your restaurant, maybe not, but that show that you're an authority on seafood. And 2 years later, which would be now, everyone in your whole neighborhood, in your whole area knows, oh, Sean's the seafood guy. Of course, I'll go eat at his restaurant. Of course, I'll give him some money if I have some to invest in a restaurant, because he knows more about seafood than anyone else in the whole market.
And that takes time. And that's what people sometimes don't want to give into. I mean, heck, I'm going to throw myself out there, Chris. I'm the same way at times. I have to fight that urge of impatience, that urge of instant gratification. And it's very tough, but anything worthwhile takes time. And building trust, building up a reputation absolutely takes time, and getting sometimes to where you want to go takes time, especially when it comes down to money. People believe that money is going to solve their problems. I think creativity can solve the same problems that you believe money will solve. It just takes thinking outside of the box.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Well, Sean, it was an absolute pleasure to hang out with Seth. Like I said, he was so hospitable, such a courteous and thoughtful man. Do you have any other thoughts before we kind of wrap things up?
No, Chris, I think that wraps us up. What an incredible interview you had with Seth. Major takeaways, I know, especially for me. I mean, everything from things that are not working now versus not going to work ever, how looking for reassurance is often futile. Creating experiences is what it's all about. All great stuff that leads us into who the next guest is going to be. So who do we have upcoming, Chris?
Sean, we have one of the top leadership experts in the world, written over 7, 8, maybe 10 books now. I can't even keep track, but they're all good. John Gordon, he speaks with and consults with the NFL, the NBA, college football. It's pretty awesome. We had an awesome conversation and look forward to sharing that with you. For any of the show notes for this conversation, for this episode number 2, just head over to the website, chrishillonline.com/podcast. There'll be some information there on Seth, some of his books, and some other resources that we talked about. And on that note, we're going to wrap things up. But before we do, a little word of inspiration, which I will actually give from Zig Ziglar. And this is Seth Godin's favorite quote that he always references to Zig, which is, "You can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want." On that note, signing off. Cheers.